of inviting everybody in the Democratic primary. And of course, we look forward to a visit from Larry Krasner. But as this is the 2021 election season, even though it doesn't seem like anything normal today, we will be hearing from everybody who was running in the primaries.
Hey, how you doing?
We are lucky to have.
So I explained to him that we are nonpartisan. I explained to him that we have a long legacy of hosting all candidates from the governor on down. I explained to him that, we're excited to hear about why he's running and what problems he has identified and he has solutions to in his platform. So he's very happy to come and talk to us. But I also have good news for everyone that's on the call. While we're sitting here, I just want you all to know that I'm enjoying vanilla fudge. It gets better. And guess what? I went out and bought a mini cake. Look at it.
Yeah.
Look at how pretty
You're
it is.
lucky you.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at this, right?
Yeah.
It looks good enough to eat.
So that's what I'm going to do while I'm talking to you all. So guess what? John, instead of going out getting guns, get yourself some Talenti and get yourself some fudge cake.
Okay. Yes, you got my email address. Send that information to me. Well, on a more specific note, I'm seriously considering running for an office. I'm sick of this shit.
What are you thinking of running for, John?
Well, I'm going to speak to Anton, my ward leader, and say, and tell him, work with him, see what's available.
I think "sick of this shit" is a great motto.
Yes.
Because it's shit. But hey, John, you could start running for something like ward or committee.
Well, he's got a good ward leader. He's got a good ward leader.
No, I have great respect for my ward leader. He's a great, wonderful guy, Anton Moore. And well, I'm going to sit down, try to get in touch with him and see what's available.
May I say something, Sam?
Yes.
I just came to tell you that I love you all, and I'm truly thrilled about Georgia, and that I made so many phone calls in Spanish, and that I don't know about Latino men. I'm ready to give them up. The Latino women are another story, but the Latino men, well, those I managed to talk to were not particularly welcoming. But what's happening is truly, truly serious. I'm so worried about what happened to John Fetterman yesterday. And I think the Republicans are either going to dissolve or we are in sedition. And I wanted to know what you guys think, because I have a husband to go feed and I can't give him fudge. I don't have any at home.
I think we have a seditious virus that it requires the same kind of vigilance that we are using, that the progressives are using to deal with the coronavirus. But we have to be vigilant, and we have to fight it off. I do think we'll survive it as we survived the coronavirus, because I think that the people in Washington, while they are scary as hell, they also look like clowns because they are clowns.
Clowns are supposed to be funny.
You were so right about Georgia. I didn't believe you last month.
Yeah, that's right.
Beth was right.
Yeah. Well, I exactly. Beth was right, and I quoted you and the need for the Biden administration to do a better job of communicating with the Latinx community, and I mentioned that that someone said this more or less the day after the election, and that it was an academic, Magali Larson.
Yeah, well, Sam, thank you. I can rely on you for my publicity. But
well, I think we have a pretty jam-packed agenda tonight.
We really have to get going.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sydney is chairing.
No, Sydney is me. I'm Melissa Robbins. I'm on the reporter's laptop. So it's really me, Melissa.
Hi, Melissa.
You can rename yourself if you want to, Melissa, if you right click on your video.
You don't know this, Beth, but I have an associate's degree in theater. That means I don't mind showing up as another, person.
Okay, that's
Like
fine.
a character.
This is one of the most beautiful names.
Whatever
that
makes you
exists.
happy.
I acted in the same theater that gave Tina Fey her start.
But does anybody know who is the poor woman who died? Who is she? Is she one of
I
ours?
have
Heard of that.
They haven't said who she is yet.
Or is she one of theirs?
Seems likely.
Either way,
It's sad.
it's sad.
Someone got that she got shot in the Capitol. I mean, who would have
Yeah,
thought
and-
waking up, someone would be killed, blood would be shed in our Capitol
Yeah.
after the president.
Well, get used to, guys. I can tell you that the coups in Argentina are much, much safer because the military they run their tanks to the equivalent of the White House, and then the people in the pink house leave and the militaries take over. Nobody gets hurt.
Not right away. I mean, that's when they gather up the dissidents and throw them out of the helicopters into the sea.
No, I know, but that's the real bad coups. But before, yeah.
I don't think this coup is going anywhere.
We'll see.
Yeah.
All right.
Even, that I read a report that the National Association of Manufacturers are urging
The
Pence,
25th.
to invoke the 25th Amendment. I mean, he could have done that from the get-go. I mean,
Yeah.
Pence is a yellow liver, spineless, gutless waste of human life.
I love it.
I can say even worse things about him. I want me to try.
Maybe we should start with our speakers.
You're on a roll,
Yes.
John. You're on a roll.
Yeah, let's start with our speakers, and but we obviously are going to return to the Nut House, that is the Capitol today. Oh my goodness, Carolyn Nichols, Judge Nichols.
Yeah, I made it. Hi,
Hi.
Hi, Judge
Yes.
Nichols.
how are you?
Great.
Yep.
Now we do have a packed agenda today. Is Representative Fiedler on?
Hi, I'm here. Hi,
Oh,
Sam. Great to
Hi,
see you.
Liz.
How are you?
Hi, Liz.
everybody.
Yeah, I just want to recognize Representative Fiedler has an eviction moratorium that she has been working on in the battle zone that is Harrisburg. And I know she has a time constraint, and if it's okay with everybody, I thought we would go to Representative Fiedler first. Okay, everyone. If you live in South Philly, and probably if you don't, Elizabeth Fiedler. Remind me of the number.
184, House District
184.
184.
Yes, who represents the 184th in South Philadelphia, and take it away, Liz.
Thank you, Sam. I'm Representative Elizabeth Fiedler. I was just sworn in yesterday for my second term in the Pennsylvania State House. So excited to represent House District 184, which, as you said, is South Philadelphia, east of Broad, south of Wharton, plus half a dozen blocks on the west side of Broad Street. Let me turn that off. One of the pieces of legislation, or one of the issues, like you said, that I've been working on very, very hard since the beginning, but most definitely even more intensely during COVID, is related to housing. And obviously, we know a lot of people are having trouble paying for their housing right now. People who are renters, people who are mortgage holders who own their home, along with the bank, people who are these small mom and pop landlords who own one or two houses, maybe they were left to them by their family members. they're also having a tremendously hard time paying their bills. So working on the eviction and foreclosure moratorium is something that I've been doing really intensely. We're about to reintroduce that bill with Representatives Summerlee and Sarah and Murado from out west, from Allegheny County and Pittsburgh. I also have an eviction expungement bill, which I'm about to reintroduce. This time I'll be introducing it with State Representative Rick Krajewski, who's a new state rep from West Philly. And that will ensure that people who are who unfairly have an eviction put on their record, when it goes through the whole process and they're found to be not at fault, then it goes away. It's something a lot of people don't know. If you go through the process, it stays with you. And for a lot of people, it really haunts them as they go through their life trying to find safe, secure housing, whether or not they had an infraction, whether or not they did something wrong. And that to me is really beyond the pale of anything that we should allow. So been working on the eviction and foreclosure moratorium to ensure people can stay in their homes, working on eviction expungement, and then also working on a number of fixes to the rent and mortgage relief program. We have a financial relief program, or we had one in Pennsylvania. Some of you may have heard about it. Unfortunately, the state of Pennsylvania did not spend all of the federal dollars that we were given for that housing relief program. And in large part, it was an Inquirer story, in large part, the reason that we did not spend all those federal dollars and ended up putting them into backfill the corrections budget is because of problems that existed in the program from the beginning. So I had a bill with State Representative Morgan Cephas, also from Philadelphia, and with State Rep Austin Davis from out west. We had a bill that was to make some changes to that relief program that Governor Wolf had requested that would have allowed more people simply to access the funding that was available. So cutting red tape, making sure that landlords could set up payment plans if they wished, in agreement with their tenants for dollars after the $750. Really just making it easier to apply for these government dollars that are available, right? We know a lot of people, especially during COVID, are facing additional challenges to the ones that they already had, whether those are health challenges, financial, educational, all sorts of things. And making sure that we make these state programs and federal programs as easy as possible to access is really important to me. So that's kind of the package of bills that we've been working on related to housing. On Thursday, the 14th, we're going to be re-releasing them, a new sort of updated version of the Safe at Home bill package, and been working with a number of senators on the other side of the building, including Senator Vince Hughes and Senator Nikhil Saval and Senator Katie Muth on various parts of these housing package bills. So I'd be really glad to take any questions from folks. I do want to emphasize something that I've heard a lot from people in particular on social media, but also in direct conversations is obviously, we look at people who rent, people who own, people who are small mom and pop landlords. They're all facing challenges. Their struggles in many ways are interconnected, right? If a person who rents a home can't pay, then that means the small mom and pop landlord can't pay. So we need to ensure that in addition to moratoriums, which would keep people safe and in their homes, we need to make sure we're actually getting the relief dollars to people so that they can, for example, pay the banks who are going to come calling. So with that, I would be very glad to take any questions.
Representative Fiedler, hello, thank you for what you do. Magali, I'm concerned about one situation because some people, I know young Latinos, they are documented as a matter of fact, but the problem is that they have had to move and they don't have the money for the deposit. They go to mom and pop landlords. I wonder if these housing bills can possibly consider the situation of the 2 months deposit, something that to help them there.
So thank you for that question. I appreciate that. So you're saying perhaps a program that would assist people with paying the deposit for a new rental property so that they could kind of get their feet under them and get settled in a new place?
Well, some of them have to wait till they can get settled in a new place till they have these 2 months or 3 months deposit. And I wondered if in the same way that our bank deposits are guaranteed by the government, whether we could not guarantee the small landlord that their tenants will not walk out on them, as you are doing all the other things to face the eviction and moratorium.
I think that's a really interesting idea. I'll definitely look into that. Thank you for that idea. And I think that's a very good point. In addition to paying the monthly fees, people often have to pay a deposit up front, whether it's a straight deposit or a pet deposit, or for some additional charges that can really add up. So thank you for that idea. I appreciate that.
Rep. Fiedler, do you think that you will have support from across the aisle for these bills?
Hi, Beth. Thank you for that
How are
important
you?
question. I would really hope so.
I mean, I
for
would
the,
too.
yeah, right. Because we know that eviction, foreclosure, trouble paying bills is something that impacts people across the state, regardless of whether they live in an urban or a rural place, regardless of their party affiliation, regardless of whether they vote. I can tell you for sure that the one specific bill that I had, the rent and relief program bill that would have fixed the program, had overwhelming bipartisan support, so much so that a House Republican introduced an incredibly similar bill, and it passed the state house. And I was very, very glad, to be quite honest, because I want to see people get help more than anything else, so they can stay in their homes. Unfortunately, our colleagues in the Senate were not as supportive. But in the House, we saw, it was overwhelmingly supported on both sides. And like I said, it was came from one of the most senior House Republicans who introduced it. So there definitely is a recognition from the other side of the aisle that this is should be a bipartisan issue, that this impacts all of our constituents. Whether the moratorium bill specifically gets that support, we will see. I know a lot of us are really holding our breath to see, as some of these protections are lifted, what will happen next. And I hesitated to say holding our breath because it's truly awful to imagine, right? It's awful to imagine a child who counts on their school for virtual schooling to sit at the dinner table to not have a home anymore, or, one of our senior citizens, or any person to be without a home ever, but especially during a pandemic. So I'm hopeful. I'm working very, very hard. And like I said, we've got a really broad collection of lawmakers in both chambers who are pushing them. So I am hopeful. And if nothing else, I'm hopeful we can find a way to get some of these federal relief dollars, at least to people in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia.
I have a question. So we just saw the Commonwealth pretty much waste the $108 million. Granted, it's going to go to corrections, but we know that it could be used in a more effective and productive way for our residents. So my question to you is, if by chance your bill is passed, how are you guys going to ensure that the verbiage used for the application process isn't such that so we have the same results have happened before? People applied for it and we saw how difficult it was for people to successfully apply, and hence our time expired and millions sat. So what are you going to do to ensure that the process of applying is user-friendly and easy for the vast majority of Americans who we know need it? And the second part of this is, how are you going to ensure that this information reaches the people that it needs to reach? Because granted, you get the bill passed, granted, you get the verbiage right. How are you going to ensure that people gain the information?
Mm-hmm.
To know
Thank
that
you for those. Yeah, thank you for those important questions, Melissa. I appreciate it. So on the first piece, and I would be glad to share this with your group, we really did outline in the bill, in the relief bill, we outlined very, very specific changes that needed to occur to the program. And these are changes that were requested both by PHFA, which was the state authority that was in charge of distributing the funds, and also very specifically by the governor and his administration, based on their assessment of the dollars that had yet to be distributed and the different levels of red tape that people were facing, and other restrictions, honestly, within the program that were holding people back. So I have it here. I'm just going to read through a few of these examples because I feel like they are so incredibly specific, and they really drive home that this is a program that we could and should fix going forward as we see more federal relief dollars in, and it would allow a lot more people to take advantage of the program, to access these dollars and stay in their home, which is certainly my goal. So for example, things that our bill would fix, the last version of it were to increase rental assistance to 130% of the federal market rate instead of the current $750, and the need for renters and homeowners to go at least 30 days late on payments before they could get help, and the need for renters and homeowners to waive their rights to get help. We also included a clause to set aside a portion of the aid that would go to small mom and pop landlords to ensure that some of these folks in our community who do have properties and are good neighbors hold on to them, rather than, you know, them losing their home and it going to a giant management company that may be out of state. And we also included removing some of the more time-consuming and unnecessary unemployment verification status measures that were required. So there were a lot of things in there that would have really allowed more people to access it. And like I said, we were on calls all day today and on Monday, trying to make sure that as we push forward with the future dollars, the federal dollars that are coming, that these measures are put in place for the program. So that's one thing I would say. And then as far as ensuring more people are aware of this, one thing that I've talked a lot about on our calls is simple language and communication. So ensuring that, you know, we know that Philadelphia and in particular our district are very diverse places. That includes languages, that includes internet accessibility and literacy, that includes age, that includes many things, right? So we need to make sure that we've got mailers going to houses, we've got to have digital ads, we need to make sure that they're translated into as many languages as possible. And those are things that were really not done to the extent that they should have been done in the previous version. And so I'm hopeful that we will be able to push for some more of that for the new rental and mortgage assistance program.
And just one more part of that. I think it's very important, I'm sure you'll agree to this, that we determine where people are and meet them there, because as much as we would like to think that, you know, people pay attention to their mail, we've seen since DeJoy went in that all mail has gone to hell and people don't trust that they're going to get their mail. So my suggestion to you is to really, really consider where people are and where they spend their time and meet them wherever that is.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. One idea that I was discussing with some colleagues the other day was literally thinking about that idea. Where are people, right? We know during the pandemic, people spend more time in their homes. That's just a fact for a lot of people, but most folks still go to the grocery store. They still, you know, we can name 5 or 10 places where people go. Why not advertise this program and other things in the places where people still are physically present? So I think that that's a really good point. Thank you.
Representative Fiedler, is there anything that people who are interested in seeing these bills passed can do?
That's a great question. You could call Speaker Cutler and express to him your support for this bill. I would say even calling whoever your state senator and state representative are and expressing the importance of this issue, talking about the moratorium, talking about fixing the rent and mortgage relief program is always helpful. We do have a really strong housing working group that I'm really excited to be one of the heads of, but it would be great to have additional support from all of our colleagues and to make sure that it's very clear to our leadership who has been supportive, but make clear that it's, you know, a top priority and something they want to see their elected representatives focusing on.
I told Mary Isaacson about it today when I ran into her. But I'm sure that she said.
I have
Great.
a quick question, if I may. It's Wendy Bowers. It's nice to see you, Representative Fiedler.
Hi, Wendy.
How are you? And thank you for the work that you're doing, especially the part about removing the evictions from people's record, because I see that through my work at the Housing Authority all of the time of what an impediment that can be. So I can't express in words how important that is for people to be to move forward in their lives and obtain housing. I just had one question for you, and I know that you know this, the city passed, and Helen Game was very active in this, the right to counsel in the eviction proceedings in, I think it was November of 2019 at this point. And it's kind of been halted, that program, because of COVID and because they have not been proceeding with the evictions. But if this goes through under your bill, would you be working with the people who are in charge of that program at the city level to help administer some of this? Because there's definitely the language barriers for people. And it seems like this would lend nicely to the council that are now going to be assigned to people by the city. Once that's up and running, would there be a connection with those programs?
If it did pass, yes, I would absolutely hope that there would be.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I had to ask.
Do you mind if I jump in really briefly to answer a question that was in the chat? Hi, everyone. I'm Rep. Fiedler's Chief of Staff, Katie. I did also want to uplift that another of the state representatives as a part of the housing working group, Representative Innamorato. I believe she might also have a co-sponsor, but forgive me, I'm not remembering who it is. They also have a specific bill that would increase resources for the right to counsel for people going through the housing process. So that bill, which is a part of the Safe at Home package, would also expand those resources. And then in terms of the question, what is the House bill number for the pieces of legislation that we're talking about? They will all be getting new House bill numbers when they are reintroduced for the upcoming session, but I can link to the House website, that landing page that lists the description of the housing package as a whole with the old, oh yes, it just was put in the chat. It has last session's House numbers, House bill numbers, and you can still access more information about the version that existed in the previous session from those numbers.
Okay, any other questions for Rep. Fiedler? All right, well, thank you so much for telling us about these important bills, Representative. And I think we all have some phone calls to make to our own representatives to encourage them.
And for your work, thank you.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you for all you do.
So we want to find out, do we have Carlos Vega on the line? I know that he said he would join us at 7:30. Carlos, are you there?
I'm here. Can you see me?
Hi.
I see you.
Hey,
I'm
Carlos.
sorry, I'm using my cell phone.
It's
So.
quite all right. We thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule, because I know that you have a busy schedule. So we're very thankful that you're here and you can join us. So I want to go ahead and introduce you. As you all know, we are upon our next district attorney's race, and Carlos Vega here has served as a prosecutor for over 35 years. Is that correct?
Yes, I have.
Over 35 years, and he was the first Latino prosecutor for the city of Philadelphia. Is that correct as well?
Yes, in fact, for the entire state.
Ooh, and there we have it. So sad that we're still living in a time of first for people of color, Black and brown specifically, but here we are nonetheless. So we'd like to welcome candidate for district attorney, Carlos Vega, who is going to join us and share with us why he's running and some of the issues that he sees going on in the city and his solutions. So we'd like to welcome you to our monthly call, Carlos Vega.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. You've introduced me very well, but so you can know me a little better, I was born and raised in New York, and I came to Philadelphia back in 1982. Straight out of law school, I came to the district attorney's office. Edward Rendell had recruited me from law school. It was always my dream, and in college and in law school, we had debates about public service and how to better serve the community as a person of color. And there were others who said maybe in the public defender's office, we could help our people. I always thought that I should be the voice of the victim. And the reason being is my family had a grocery store in New York, and we had to survive. We provided a service to the community, but it was a very hard job. We were burglarized multiple times. 3 times that I know of, we were robbed at gunpoint, and 1 time at knife point. you know, and shoplifting and everything. We survived the riots of the 60s, you know, when there was looting. And in 1977, when we had the blackout, you know, everyone in the community stood in front of the store and protected our store. I always worried about my parents getting hurt. And I had a strong work ethic in that all hands were on deck. I would work in the store because my father at night would work in a restaurant and my mother would have to close the store alone. In Philadelphia, I served 5 years in major trials, but then eventually in 1987, I was promoted to the homicide unit. So for 30 years, I was in the homicide unit doing the murder cases and some of the most horrendous murders that occurred in the city. I worked 2 jobs during that time, you know, 15 years at UPS, because they reached the point that working in the city, you don't make a lot of money. And I had to educate my children. If you don't know, I'm a single parent and I raised my daughter since she was 5. She's 23 now, always bumping heads because she thinks she's too cute. And my son, who's 17 years old now, he's a junior in high school. And we're undergoing the issue of virtual schooling and how we get over that hurdle, because it's very hard. And I never thought I'd heard a child say that I want to go to school, but he's doing it virtually. And today he told me that one of his friends had passed away from illness. In terms of why I'm running, I'm currently retired, but during this 2-year period or more, I've been getting a lot of calls from victims and victims' families. The crime rate has gone up and the murder rate. And I've always given my family members my cell phone, almost like a community of families that they know each other. So I've met a lot of people that have called me on the phone asking what could be done about this. And they've asked me would I consider running. And as a result, I've decided to run for district attorney. So if you have any questions, I'm here available to talk about what I intend to do or what questions you have or what you want done with the city.
Mr. Vega, this is David Sternberg. Philly, can you hear me?
I hear you.
We just need
okay, I mean,
to
be totally honest with you, and I'm sure you're aware of this, in 2017, Philly for Change did endorse DA Krasner. The trends that you're talking about in terms of increased rates and crime rates are national trends. Now, to get rid of an incumbent, you need, there needs to be a reason usually. In your case, what would you argue is the reason why we should get rid of DA Krasner and elect you?
Because with his progressive agenda, what he has done, he has ignored completely the victims of crime. We see that right now, 87% of all murder victims are African American, 12% are Latino. Those numbers are outrageous, and he has really, with his agenda, focused on other issues rather than dealing with the crime rate that's occurring in our community. People who are Black and brown need protection. Their children need to be safe. They need to be able to go to work, and parents shouldn't be worried about their child getting shot or killed. I mean, with the numbers we had to realize every day this year, a mother or father was called that their child was killed. Every day, several parents were called that their child was shot. And when you hear that a child was shot, people, you know, it's an easy word to hear, but when you think of a shooting victim, you have to think they're crippled. Some are paralyzed, some become quadriplegics, some have to wear a colostomy bag for life, and some emotionally are traumatized forever. When you're a shooting victim, you don't get over that. And then it brings issues of rage, anger, why me? Then there's retaliation shooting. So really ignoring the victims and ignoring communities of color is outrageous. I don't think that's progressive. I mean, we need change. And I've always been at the front line. I mean, I've broken barriers. I mean, I've been discriminated against, but I've had to ignore those because I represent the people of color. It's refreshing when a person would come to court and say, he understands my problem. He is just like me. He comes from where I come from. So that is the reason I'm running for office. There does need to be a change, but that change comes in increments, and that change cannot be ignoring people of color.
Thank you.
Mr. Vega, can you point to a case or a policy of the current DA that you would do differently?
Well, I think one thing that is important is the training level. We're having district attorneys who are not really well equipped to go to court yet. When I came into court, there was a grooming process because people think when you graduate from law school, you're a lawyer. You're not. It's like a doctor graduating from medical school. He's never done anything. You have to learn, and you have to learn from more experienced people. And I see there's a lack of experience in that office and a lack of training. Also, there's been an issue of, and I'm going back to the victims, a lack of communicating with them. One thing under Rendell, there was a movement or a protocol that with every file we got, there was an index card and it said, notify your family. And when you had a case, you would call that person and keep them abreast of what was going on. Because when you're a victim of a crime, and God forbid you should have become a victim of a crime, but you don't know the system. So let's use the example where you lost your child. You don't know what happens or what you can do, but you as their attorney, your advocate, you explain the process and they have 1,000 questions to ask. And it's not just one day they ask those questions because the moment you hang up the phone, they think of 20 others. So it's experience, training, but also getting back to the basics of communicating with victims. And what I see troubling with me is I came in the office before cell phones, before pagers, before computers. And now everyone has a cell phone. I'm talking on my cell phone. So it's inexcusable for me not to be able to contact the victim saying, this is what occurred. This is my number. If you have any question, call me. I've always, when I've lectured to young DAs, is this: our job does not stop at 5 o'clock. Our job is 24/7. You have to be available for that victim because at 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night or 11, that mother has a question. She is reaching out to someone and we are that only person that could explain what's going on.
So are you saying that right now people in the DA's office are not responding to victims? You've heard this?
Oh, absolutely. I've had plenty of mothers, African American mothers, Spanish mothers. I was in a Zoom just yesterday where they were complaining that they learned about the results of their cases through the newspaper. An example that is glaring was the Asian business owner that was shot with the AK-47 that was on video. That person was not spoken to. I mean, that man was shot. His family was changed. He cannot work anymore to feed his family. And that DA never had at minimum, the courtesy to say, this is what's happening with your case. Do you have an opinion? Do you want to be in court? And at least tell the court what has happened to you, what harm you have suffered. Because you realize this, and we forget this. When you're arrested, you have all these rights. You have a right to remain silent. You have a right to an attorney. You have a right to bail. You have a right to a jury trial of your peers. But when you are robbed, what rights do you have? You have nothing. The only thing you have is finally going to the district attorney and saying, can you bring me some justice? And I'm going to explain this to you, having been in homicide 30 years. The saddest thing is I could bring a result that you would call on paper justice. But the one thing a mother wants is this: I want my child back. And that's one thing I cannot give back. It's not the thing that the court system to give back the life of that child. So absolutely, there's been a loss and a failure of talking to the victims. They have no one to turn to but the district attorney.
So I have a question for you, Mr. Vega. So we look at, we have topped over 502 murders here in the city of Philadelphia in 2020. We saw a huge brawl with city council and the amount of money that was being offered for the budget. We saw the police department get $727 million. And we saw that 3 of the city council members obviously did not agree with that. They were the 3 dissenting votes. But we also saw the Kenny administration propose, I think it was about $33 million for the district attorney's budget. So I guess my question to you is, with over the past 3 years, 2017, 18, and 19, we've seen less than 50% of the crime solved here in the city of Philadelphia. Back in 2017, we were around 37%. 2018, we were around 48%. Right now, we're looking at roughly 44% of the crimes being solved. So I give you all of those numbers to say that the police department has this astronomical budget to work with, right? And we see a lot of the money is going to overtime with protests and demonstrations. But we also see a small percentage of murders actually being solved as far as investigations and witnesses. And we're seeing the district attorney work with this small budget. So how much of this is the responsibility of the district attorney's office versus actual police work and crimes being solved with this huge budget? What's your take on that?
Well, it takes two forms. There's the police are the tip of the spear, and then the district attorney is the other part. When you talk about, let's talk about homicides only, okay? In the homicide unit, there are only 5 squads in there. The 5th squad is called 5 Squad, and they're the cold case unit. They're working on cases that did not occur. Now, let's think of a squad has maybe 10 detectives. We've had days where there are 3 or 4 murders in one day. They are spread thin, at which point they have to call people from 5 Squad to help them. We're also living in an age of, and we've had this for years, the don't no snitch culture, okay? There are people who are hesitant to come forward to testify or don't want to get involved. But now we've seen with the policy of the district attorney of letting people with guns and selling drugs out, witnesses that would have ordinarily come forward are hesitant because they go, if I come forward, that person's going to be out in the street within a few hours. They're going to be out in the street before I even leave the police station giving a statement. So I see people, poor people are being held hostage in their community. So you talk about the overtime, but you have to think these detectives have families, they want to go home, but they're spread very thin with the number of homicides we're having. So is it being solved at the rate that we want to? Absolutely not. But the thing is, we need a larger unit of detectives to do that. But by the same measure, the district attorney has to enforce the laws. And I'll use this example. I had a case where 2 men executed a 15-year-old boy and a 27-year-old man. They were knelt down and they were shot in the head each. Mr. Krasner reduced the sentence of one of them to 7 to 14 years. Now, when I did that trial, those witnesses were afraid. It took me 3 years to solve that case because all the witnesses were threatened and they finally came forward. Now think of it. They went to a trial, they testified, and they initially received the life sentence, okay? A 15-year-old child was killed, execution style. And Mr. Krasner reduced the sentence to 7 to 14 years. That person is getting out in 3 months. Now think, those people are poor. They couldn't leave the neighborhood, but I got rid of the person that was destroying that neighborhood. Now, how do they feel now that they put their safety, their reputation on the line to do what is right, what we say, come into court and testify, it's the right thing to do. And now they're seeing this man who brutally killed 2 people is out in the street saying, I'm here. I mean, that is frightening. And that causes people, I'm not going to get involved because I have to live here. My children have to live here. So I'm not getting involved. And that is a problem. There is murder where people are intentional. Evil is first-degree murder. And then there are issues where it's third-degree murder or voluntary manslaughter. And you take each case on a case-by-case basis. But when you have a horrendous murder like that, and he is out in the street, it sends a message to people saying, why bother? Why get involved? I have to live here. They know who my children are. They know who my grandmother is. I've seen many a mother that grandmothers say, oh, my son lives in Georgia. He joined the army. He has a better life. But guess what? He left mom behind. She's in a neighborhood that's being torn and ravaged by drugs and shooting. So absolutely, the district attorney has to be there to saying there is accountability. If you are an extremely violent person, I will make your community safe. Of course, there are people we can help, and we extend that hand. people that are ravaged with drug addiction, and we can help them, you know, and there are programs to do that. But I'm sorry, you know, you can't have this progressive agenda where you ignore people of color saying, go figure it out, because I have this agenda that, oh, I want to, you know, help these people. That man who killed those two people had a choice. He pulled the trigger, pointed at their heads and killed them, and didn't care. And now he's coming out in 3 months. So that's the problem. The police need to be better trained. Absolutely, they need more manpower, but also we have to ensure the community feels safe, that they not afraid to come forward and at least tell the police what's going on. Because, you know, it's very easy for me to tell somebody, oh, come in and testify. That is the hardest thing in the world, to testify, to look at a person who's committed a violent crime and then go home knowing that person knows who you are, what you did, and where your family lives. That is very difficult.
Okay, so I have two follow-up questions, and that's horrible just hearing that. It really is. But I guess my when I think about what you just said about people being fearful to come and testify, one, whose responsibility is it to keep people safe when they do say, hey, I know what happened, I saw it, I want to testify, but I need to ensure of my safety. One, whose responsibility is this? And if we're seeing the district attorney's office get this tiny budget, how could they on God's green earth provide any kind of protection? That's one. And I don't know whose responsibility that is. So, and the second thing, you said you think that we need more police manpower. If with a budget of $727 million, that does not provide enough manpower, and the manpower that we do have, obviously this has nothing to do with the district attorney's office. This has everything to do with the training that recruits are receiving and current officers being equipped, i.e. The one officers, when Mr. Walter Wallace was publicly executed, they're saying that our officers had no pepper spray to de-escalate that. So that has nothing to do with the district attorney's office. I guess what I'm seeing is, since the Kennedy administration has been in, each year we've seen the police department receive at minimum a $30 million increase in their budget over the last 4 years. So we're seeing money being thrown at the police department, but we're not seeing murders being solved, and we're not seeing gun violence go down. But we also see, I guess my concern is this: I see a lot of onus being placed on the district attorney's office, but I see a small number, a small budget, a small amount to work with. And we're seeing millions thrown at the police department, and we're not seeing a lot of results, but we keep hearing we need more manpower. And we looked at the last graduating class from the police academy that was 100% white in a city with 46% Black people. That too is problematic, because you say more manpower, well, where are they coming from?
Okay.
Where are they coming from?
Well, you've asked several questions, and
I know, and I'm sorry.
next I write it down and I could keep up. But when you're talking about the example of Wallace, where you said it was a public execution, if you delve into the facts and read about him, he had several arrests, and I think he believed, and I don't know everything about the case because I didn't have access to it, but he had some mental problem issues that had to be addressed, and he had been arrested several times. And in fact, the mother had called the police to try and get him to calm down. And we see that the police need more training in terms of, first of all, they should have had at least tasers, something like that, and other people that are prepared to deal with that, bring in a supervisor or someone who's trained to de-escalate, okay? But with that said, when you're talking about the individuals or the DA's office being blamed for it, that young man should have had the DA's office intervene and get him that mental help, because he had several cases, one where he had beaten up his girlfriend and one where he had beaten up his mother. And those two cases had court intervention, but he was allowed out rather than putting him in a program to address his mental issue. I don't know if he needed to be forced to take his meds or get counseling. In terms of, you said it's a white police department. I'll explain it like this, and I'll say as a district attorney, people coming out of law school now, and people of color, and when I've tried to recruit people, a lot of minorities are in high demand and the big law firms would take them. There are a lot of minorities who do not want to do public service, and that's in the legal field, okay, to become an assistant DA who's making a minimal salary as opposed to someone going to the big firm. When you talk about a white police department, we have to do, and we do it at a certain level, national hiring. Think of it. I was from New York. I went to law school in Boston. Rendell, who had a vision of making a professional office, reached out to me in Boston to bring me to Philadelphia. What the police department needs to do is to reach out and get the cream of the crop throughout the country. You know, make Philadelphia a wonderful place that you want to work and serve that community. We do need people of color, absolutely. But if we're just looking in our community, that's just not enough. We need to recruit people in Boston, you know, North Carolina, Florida, all that stuff, and get the cream of the crop and make the police department have more people of color. Absolutely. I don't know the numbers of Black officers or Latino officers. You know, the numbers are increasing, but we're also in a day and age that it is not attractive to perform public service. It's not attractive to become a police officer, because I've seen on video, and it's hurtful when you see some rioting or people are screaming at the police, and then they start, you know, you have, let's say, a white rich person telling a Black police officer what being Black is. And that is hurtful as a person of color, having an elitist tell me what it is to be Latino or Black. That is a problem.
Are you still with us?
I think he lost his audio.
Oh, no. Carlos, are you still there?
All right. Well,
Looks
hopefully
like we lost him, and hopefully he'll be able to jump back on.
yeah.
Beth, if you want to keep moving, and when he comes back, we'll just
Yeah.
allow him to continue. Okay.
Yeah. So, and actually, in the interest of time, we should probably move on anyway. So, but yes, hopefully.
Hello?
Oh, you're back.
Sounds like he's
You,
back.
so my daughter called me and it knocked me off. I'm so sorry. Where was I? So if you bring the question again, is this? It's a very it's a very difficult question to answer. And with respect to the police, and you're talking about their budgets increasing, there is a need for manpower. There's a need for better training and more people who come from a community that they understand what's going on. I've always had a problem also with the police training, that the district attorney's office should be part of the training in the police academy and their continuing education. So Melissa, if I've answered all your questions or I haven't, you can come back and ask me, but you asked so many.
You have answered my question, and I want to, open it up for anyone else that has questions for you before we move on.
Okay.
And this is David again. Obviously, Mr. Vega, you're a very effective advocate, and I'm sure you are a really, really good prosecutor. The question with the DA's office is a question of management. Could you talk a little bit about what in your management role in the homicide division you were able to accomplish, and what you would seek to accomplish if you were elected DA?
Okay, well, the thing is, in the 35 years I served in the DA's office, I was never in a management position. I was always in the front lines. I was a trial lawyer. Being a trial lawyer every day in court, I know what works and what doesn't work. And I've had many ideas of what can help the community. I know there are many programs that need to come in. I'll use this example of when Mr. Krasner talked about probation is a trap. And he would say, well, long probation, you're doomed to failure. Well, if I don't commit a crime, I'm not going to violate my probation. But on the other hand, he decided to shorten probation. My problem or my solution to the problem is this. When someone is put on probation, they say, go figure it out. Well, I'm not going to tell the person, go figure it out. What I want to do is give them a certain number of challenges where they have goals to achieve. So let's use this example. You receive probation. Well, I'm going to ask you, if you get your GED or vocational training, I reduce your probation. Okay, if you get drug counseling, parenting classes, I reduce your probation again. If you get an associate's, I reduce it again, until finally, if you get a job, and I mean not under the table, but a tax-paying, on paper, legitimate job, I would terminate your probation, because with all those challenges, it renews your self-respect. You're saying, look, I'm educated. I've got a trade. I've got a job. I'm part of the community. I'm a taxpayer. And it gives them a goal to achieve. And I think that's what prior administrations and this current administration has done, is turn their back on people who've been arrested, who need help. Okay, because not everybody should go to jail. Absolutely not. They need help. We have to extend that hand through programs that I would put in and give them their self-respect back, make them productive members of society, that they're now proud of what they're doing. I remember a judge many years ago, whenever one of our probationers got her GED, they would come to court and we'd get them a cake and we'd celebrate. And it meant the world to them. We really need to bring back the self-esteem of these people, because when you think of an example of drug addicted people, they have hit rock bottom. They have done things that they're ashamed of. And finally, if I could give them their self-esteem back, it means the world to them, and it makes our community safer. What would I do as a chief? I want experience. I want people with compassion, to be fair, to bring justice, and do what is right. But one thing we have to remember is we are the voice of victims. We're the voice of that silent majority that work every day hoping their children have a better life. So I would institute programs. An example of, let's say, prostitution. You know, it's you say it's a victimless crime. No, there are victims. It's those young ladies. I've never believed, and I have a daughter, no girl is born says, I want to be a prostitute. I want to have sex with 20 men a day. No, they want to be a ballerina, a doctor, a mother. And we have to take those ladies who are being exploited and bring them counseling. There's a program that was doing very well called the Dawn program, where we're putting these young ladies, addressing their addiction, addressing issues of picking a wrong lifestyle or the wrong men who put them in this lifestyle, and they were getting the help. And I've realized now that the Krasner administration has not taken these women and arrested them. And I'm not saying arrest these women to punish them, but if I get them in the system, then I can force them to get the help they need. Because as a parent, think of it. If your child is drug addicted, you can love them to death and say, you've got to get counseling, but they're not listening to you. They need that court intervention saying, okay, I'm ordering you to go to inpatient counseling. I'm ordering you to do these challenges or steps to keep them on the straight and narrow. The many parents really want that intervention to save their daughters or to save their children. So there are programs that I see. My job is to prevent crime, but also to make people safe. So there are programs that I want to institute. And an example is my Adopt a School program. We need to bring the police and the DA's office back to the community. We have to be visible. So I've always wanted, when I've lectured to high schools and grammar schools, I go there just once and they have a great time, but I have to leave. I'm going to demand, with 300 attorneys, every attorney has to adopt a school and has to be there every other week from 8 o'clock till 4 o'clock. At that time, they see the children go to school, they see the parents bring them to school, and during the day, have coffee, have donuts with the parents, listen to what their concerns are, because every neighborhood has a different issue. Some might be drugs, some might be dumping, some might be prostitution, but they're talking twice a week or twice a month, seeing somebody there, someone from the DA's office. They feel comfortable. The faculty will talk about what issues are there. And the children finally get to see a lawyer, because when I became a lawyer, only lawyer I ever saw was on TV. Okay, I never met a lawyer other than what's on television. In school, they're going to see a lawyer. And also I would institute, as we get the program running, a school court system. What would be is, when a child does an infraction, they get suspended. What I would do is do a process where the children are a judge and jury, an advocate and defense attorney, where the children learn the system and they meet out what the proper protocol would be for their infraction. And it would be suspension or don't go to school. It would have to be done with the permission of the teacher who had the infraction. But suddenly they learn about advocacy and consequences. You know, it might be that the child would have to stay in detention a couple of days or write a letter of apology or do something like that. But suddenly the children are learning, well, you do a bad act and there are consequences, but they're doing it. So they're learning about the court system, and you have a DA guiding them, running that program. And I'm hoping eventually is that those DAs would be so engaged with that community and so engaged with the children that they would want to be a coach for a basketball team or a soccer team. So, you know, so that's some of the programs I'd like to bring in, dealing with prostitution, you know, the human trafficking, learn and earn, and the probation programs.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vega, for sharing your vision with us for the district attorney's office. We do have a lot of other speakers tonight, so fortunately we have to move on, but we really appreciate you being here and answering our questions.
And thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And everyone have a good night. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
Okay, so next we're going to have Michele Hangley join us. She is one of the election lawyer heroes who has been fighting on behalf of the people and our votes in Harrisburg and federal court, I think, and fighting all these lawsuits that have been brought against our election this year. So I think Michele can talk about a lot of things, but I'll let her decide if she wants to focus on what happened in Harrisburg yesterday or in DC today or all of the above. So Michele, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be talking to you guys and to see all of you. So over the last year, I have been representing the Secretary of the Commonwealth of some cases, some of the large counties in other cases, in Philadelphia, Delaware, Montgomery, Chester, and Allegheny, and Bucks. So if I wasn't representing one group, I was representing the other. And I've been in about 24 cases over the last year, just about every one that has had an effect on voting in Pennsylvania. We are, as someone who represents election administrators, I have to be nonpartisan. I mean, I'm very partisan in my personal life, but the election administrators themselves are nonpartisan. They may have their personal views. For some of them, I don't even know what their personal views are, but they, unlike in Georgia, they don't take political positions while in the course of running an election. But I find we are always on the side of the voter. And when you're on the side of the voter, that usually means that you're on the side of Democrats, almost always. So it certainly seems to play out that way. It has been the honor of a lifetime. I see that Lisa is on the Zoom. There's nobody I admire more than my election administrator clients. They ran a great election. They really did. I mean, there's so much that could have gone wrong, and it didn't. And especially in Philadelphia, Lisa and her colleagues were under incredible pressures. It just, work 24-hour shifts, complete stress, being attacked by people from all over the world. I got a taste of it, and when I had to shut my email and phones down for a few days, it was very, very tough for them. So there are a lot of things that I could talk about of what's been going on and what is going on. In some ways, after today, I thought, do you even want me here? And it seems so pointless to be talking about the niceties of election law, latches and standing and everything when the world is burning. And everything that we've done almost seems pointless. But it makes me even more, proud of what I do and intent on doing it. Because you see what happens when people don't want to do what the courts tell them to do. I mean, you see what happens when people take it beyond the court and say, well, I've got power because I'm in the majority in my house of legislation, and I'm going to do what I want, even though the various Supreme Courts have said that I can't. You see what happens that your power only lasts long enough, or as long as until someone else decides to take it from you. And whether that's, a group of a mob or another political party. And I hope that we are not going down into a worse place than we have been. I truly hope that people will learn their lesson from this, but I'm afraid that they won't. So I'll talk a little bit about what's happening in Congress legally and a little bit about what happened in Harrisburg yesterday. And then because I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I'm also happy to answer any questions. In Congress legally right now, today should have been a nothing event. There is something called the Election Count Act of 1877. It's very obscure, very wordy, very confusing, but
The Senate's going back in.
oh, great. Oh, great. That's good news. But really what it says is if the state government certifies its electors by the safe harbor date, which I believe was December 8th, and then the electors vote by December 14th, it is almost impossible to overrule that vote. But as always in any statute, there's some language that's a little bit obscure that can be wiggled around. And that's what people are using now to raise objections. The objections themselves, though, they're not what's provided for in the statute. I mean, the objection should be to something like the stagecoach with the votes was hijacked on the way to DC and replaced with another envelope. I mean, that's the sort of things that Congress should be looking at and can be raising concerns about. It's not what we're seeing, at least in the objections to Pennsylvania, which are two sets of completely contradictory objections being made in the case of Hawley by the same person. And half of those objections are that under the US Constitution, the legislature has to set the time, place, and manner of elections for Congress and for electors. And there is a rather radical view, which is held by some people on the US Supreme Court, that what that means is that the legislature can do whatever it wants to set election processes, and that even the state constitution and the state courts have no sway over that. So, basically, no matter what your state constitution says, the legislature can do whatever it wants. So half of the complaints about, or say a third of the complaints about Pennsylvania are about that issue. That is, if you might recall, the Supreme Court extended the receipt date for mail-in ballots by 3 days because of the post office, and because the post office had admitted that it could not get these ballots delivered in time. So that was a clear example of the Supreme Court looking at a statute and saying, yeah, here's what the statute says, but under the Constitution, we have to tweak it a little bit. We have to give an extra 3 days. So that had a lot of people in the legislature up in arms, and it's one of the bases for objection in Congress right now. Another basis for objection, and this is maybe another third of the objections, is that the mail-in voting was unconstitutional under the Pennsylvania Constitution, and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court should have struck down the whole mail-in voting statute. Now, these two things, it is not possible to logically reconcile these. Like, either the state Supreme Court can strike down a statute or it can't. But it's not required to strike down statutes when they help Republicans and keep statutes in place when they help Republicans. But that is the argument that Hawley is making, and I think if he goes ahead with the Pennsylvania objection as he claims he's going to make it tonight. And then the other third of objections, and I'm not familiar enough with what people are specifically saying, but there's also just a lot of honestly garbage in Pennsylvania and in every other state. These wild accusations of somebody heard something, or there are 200,000 more votes than voters. That was one that came out last week. And by the way, the source of that was that they count the votes immediately after the election. But then the next thing that the election officers do, and Lisa can correct me if I'm wrong about this, is that they go back and check all the books from the polling places to see who signed in to vote. And then they make records of who voted. And that's for a bunch of purposes, just to keep track so you can do audits, but also so you can tell who hasn't voted in a long time and might need to be stricken from the rolls, so that candidates can get their lists and figure out who's a super voter and who's not. But the process of counting the votes has to be fast. The process of figuring out who voted does not have to be fast. So there's always a time lag between one number and the other. So, but you might have seen on social media last week, there was a big hoo-ha about a 200,000 voter difference between the number of votes and the number of voters. And that, as far as I understand it, is why that number came. And then there are some numbers that I think are just made up. Like at some point, people were throwing in numbers from the primaries and saying they were from the general. People are talking about machines switching votes. And the reaction, as often as you disprove this stuff and explain things, the reaction is, well, either prove it to me, you haven't given me enough information, or it's fake news and you're lying. And that is, we're seeing it all over the country. It's very distressing. As a lawyer, I don't know that there's that much we can do about it. But one thing that came out of this year that was very good, other than the competence of Pennsylvania election administrators, was the competence of Pennsylvania judges. Overall, with a couple exceptions in the Commonwealth Court, who gave us some heartburn at times. We had a lot of very conservative judges come out with very, very strong opinions and very thoughtful in favor of the voter, in favor of voting rights, and against this kind of against these abuses of the voting system. So that is what is going to be raised in Congress if it gets raised. I truly hope that either they will back off these objections, or that they're voted down quickly and that this is all over by tomorrow. I mean, I don't have any concern about Biden becoming president, at least not any legal concern. I mean, I have a lot of concern about what's physically happening in DC. The other thing that we've seen, and I think it's part of the same story, is what happened in Harrisburg yesterday. Now, I can't say a lot about that because I represent the secretary in the federal court case, and I don't know if this might be more detailed than non-lawyers want, but it raises this kind of interesting issue of one county, Allegheny, counted ballots that didn't have dates on them. The other county, Westmoreland, refused to count those ballots. In Allegheny, it got appealed all the way up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and they said count the ballots. In Westmoreland, it didn't get appealed. And now we've got 74 votes apart. If Allegheny's votes had not gotten counted, the Republican candidate would have won. And what her lawyers are now saying is that it's an equal protection violation to count ballots in one county and not count them in another. And that is it's a credible legal point. I think it's wrong for reasons that are maybe not that appealing, just because of who did it. But where she really goes off the rails legally, I think, is that it's an equal protection violation. And so the solution to it is to disenfranchise all the people who voted in Allegheny County, just so they can be as oppressed as the people in Westmoreland County. When it's Westmoreland County that broke the law. So that is in the middle of being briefed, and we'll probably get a ruling early next week. And if the judge, as I hope and think that he will, throws out the challenge, I hope that then Brewster will be seated, and that will be the end of this particular
ruling or something. Pick something out.
But what's happened in the meantime is really troubling, because the legislature just because you have a case in federal court that might change the situation, there's no basis under the law for them to refuse to seat Brewster. So it's, again, it's a kind of sort of taking the law into your hands and a kind of self-help that is, as a citizen, scary to me, because, you know, if they can do it, who's going to do it next? And where is it going to end up? And I think today we've seen a little bit of where it's going to end up. Beth asked me to talk about Georgia as well. I mean, all I can say about Georgia really is yay. I'm not a great, they have a very different election system from ours. They have a long history of voter suppression. They have a long history of using many of the aspects of their voting law to keep people from voting. And they have a very political voting system. So the fact that they have managed to have turned Georgia blue under those circumstances with very partisan election administration is amazing to me. I don't know, and I can't tell you whether to expect any litigation over these results or not. I just don't know. It seems like they're pretty decisive, but so I'm happy to answer any questions if I can.
I had a question if nobody else does. So yesterday in Harrisburg, when they refused to seat Senator Brewster, they also kicked out Lieutenant Governor Fetterman from being president of the Senate. Is that even constitutional? Isn't it written into the Constitution that he is the president of the Senate?
I'm afraid I wish that Representative Fiedler was still here, because I'm not a parliamentary expert. I think it's happened before with him. Like, at least there's been at least one other incident where they either kicked him out or kept him from speaking or something like that. Certainly didn't seem appropriate, but I can't say whether it was legal or not. And one problem with when you get into legislatures or the executive or anything, it's you often don't have solutions, because courts do not like to get into the business of telling legislatures how to legislate. So you kind of have to trust them to behave themselves.
That seems less and less wise at this juncture. Great, thank you, Michelle. Are there other questions for Michelle from anyone?
Michelle, do you have any opinion about what's going to happen? What you think might happen to the mob, like, and the people who, not very many, but some have been arrested down there. What sort of charges, and do you think there will be charges to anyone who helped incite that mob?
So I'm following on social media. I don't know if what I'm reading is accurate. It sounds like there has been an amazingly low number of arrests. And I don't get that. Like, I think there's going to have to be a lot of questions asked about how this happened, why they weren't better prepared for it. And, I'm also not a law enforcement person, but it seems like once you have the people inside the building, it should be easy to catch them. But I don't know. But I mean, I think that it would be appropriate to charge them heavily for what they did. As for people who incited them, there are a lot of laws of immunity that apply to legislators, to judges, for good reasons, because you don't want to turn politics you don't want to turn political acts into criminal acts, and you don't want to give political parties incentives to go after their enemies by criminalizing criticism of the government. So I think it would be very hard to prosecute any of the people who incited this, except for maybe the very worst. And I mean, I think it would likely be impossible to prosecute Trump for this, as bad as it is.
Could you talk a little bit about what, because a word that gets batted around a lot is sedition, and people being charged with sedition or tried for sedition. And
Can you just talk about that a little bit?
I am not, I don't know if my understanding of it is precise enough. I think that a lot of the things that we've been calling sedition lately are not. They're not urging people to use the law to get what they want isn't sedition. Even stretching the law beyond recognition, like is happening now, even making bad faith arguments about the law, I don't think is sedition in the criminal sense. But although I do approve of the use of the word, because I don't know if we have a better word for saying you're using the tools that are given to you as a representative of the people to drag down our whole constitutional system. So I feel like sedition is it's used correctly in its broad sense, but is this really the crime of sedition? Probably rarely is it.
Michelle, I know you had something else you had to go to, and I don't want to make you late. Do you have time for one more question, or you need to go?
Sure, if anyone else has one.
Before Michelle goes, I just want to give her a shout out, and I hope, while she may not have made up a final decision, I hope to see her in the judicial race this year.
You will, Wendy.
Very good. So I didn't want to let the cat out of the bag, but
I've been a little bit busy. I'm a little bit late getting started. So.
Michelle will be running, and I'm very happy that she is.
We'll definitely have you back in another month or two when you are ready to talk about your judicial race.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for having me tonight. And Wendy, I will be looking forward to seeing you as well.
Yes.
So glad we'll be in it together.
Me too. And
All
George.
Right. And George. Oh, I see George. Okay. All right. Thanks all. Good night.
Thanks, Michelle.
Good night, Michelle.
Good night.
Thank you.
Should we go to our COVID discussion next, Sam?
Yes.
Okay. So we have two very exciting people joining us today to talk about the city's rollout of the COVID vaccine. Tarik Kahn is a nurse practitioner who's been working on the front lines, treating COVID patients and testing people. And Anna Perng is an activist who has written co-written a very interesting article in the Inquirer. I'll put the link in the chat about the city's rollout of the vaccine and a lot of the ways that it could be improved. So I will turn it over to the two of you to tell us all about it.
That was good. Anna, do you want to, since Beth gave a really good intro, do you want to talk a little bit about your article that you worked on? Really great article about the rollout.
Thank you. And thanks for having me. It's really great to see so many great friends and longtime advocates here. Some of us have gone back like decades. So it's an honor just to be a part of this group and listening and learning from all of you. So, my name is Anna Perng. I co-founded a group called the Chinatown Disability Advocacy Project. About 5 years ago, a community health clinic, Chinatown Medical Services, asked me to start up a support group because their doctors had gone into their patient records and found that of the children that had been diagnosed with autism, none of them came back for any follow-up care for the past 10 years. For them, this was a major concern because they said, we have no idea if they are well. They have not come back for vaccinations, annuals. We just lost them. So they really thought it was important to create a sort of support group where immigrants can support other immigrants with disabilities. And together over time, we realized that part of the issue was just language access, that a lot of this medical information was not available to them in their languages. Many of them, depending on their citizenship status, did not feel comfortable seeking public benefits or assistance, or even asserting their civil rights. So for the past 5 years, we've basically run monthly workshops, taught the families about how government works, invited them to testify and share their stories and advocate for the solutions that they want. There were times when they would say, well, Anna, your English is better. You can just speak on behalf of us. And I really told them that because, we're trying to grow like a movement, we really need many people to advocate, and there's not one person, especially since I'm not undocumented. I don't really have a right to speak on behalf of them for their issues. So, we've testified before City Council, the Board of Education, but this whole COVID-19, pandemic has really impacted these families. I mean, they're really kind of lost with remote learning, accessing food distribution sites because of anti-Asian racism. There's just a whole number of things that have really compounded their experience. So, when I started to hear about the vaccine coming out, I really took an interest because part of my work is explaining to the communities that I serve, what is happening, and help answer their questions. It's a topic that I think is going to come up. In the disability community, unfortunately, there is a strong anti-vaccination movement with disinformation that vaccines cause autism. So there's also a level of ableism. So I started to look at the city's documents and thank you, Beth and Tarek, for dropping the link in the chat. Basically, we had identified, my co-author, Jeff Lee. Unfortunately, he's not able to join us tonight. He would love to be here. Unfortunately, he and his family are in DC, about a block away from the Capitol building. So they're in lockdown. They've been dealing with the unrest there. And so, my thoughts are with him, but he is, he served as deputy cabinet secretary for the state of California. He has emergency management experience. And when I started to bounce off, just sort of questions about, I'm looking at the CDC's guidance and our city's documents, some of the things don't seem to line up. We thought about just maybe writing an op-ed and kind of advising. So that's the link that you see in the chat there. I'm going to summarize it quickly. 4 things that we recommended. One, which is make sure that the city's plan matches the latest CDC plan. So when the city drafted their plan, it was based on a September CDC plan. And, as with the Trump administration, they changed it again in October. So the city's plan is based on an older plan. It just needs to be updated so that it makes sense to the public. The second thing that we recommended is that the vaccine data that was on the website at the time really was very vague. It showed a map and you could see, sort of shaded areas where vaccinations were taking place or maybe people got vaccinated. It wasn't very clear. And also the only information up there was based on like gender. And so when you look at the city, they had a racial equity plan from July of this year, where they pledged to make that data, to report on COVID data and break down by race and ethnicity, just to ensure that they could track whether or not they were being equitable. And so it was curious that the vaccination data, suddenly the race and ethnicity was not available. So that was a question that we had, and we recommended that they really update it to really include marginalized communities. And especially since the CDC's updated plan recommends that we kind of track critical populations, not just seniors living in long-term care facilities, but, people who are incarcerated, people who are living in shelters. What is sort of our understanding of where those populations are, and are we meeting our goals in terms of actually vaccinating people who are really at risk of getting COVID-19. The third recommendation was just to have a more democratic process. The city had a really robust, census program, working groups, really did a lot of public engagement, a lot of outreach. And it just seemed that there was a sort of lack of information coming out about, when are we getting the vaccines? Like, who's getting the vaccines? When are they getting the vaccines? And I was talking to a community leader and they said, I have a very old parent. I'm not even sure like when he's eligible to sign up, or how, even though he's not living in a senior center or a long-term care facility, how he would sign up. So these are just sort of basic things that, we felt like the public should have information or a sense of assurance that, okay, the city is doing X, they're working with group 1A. Teachers were contacting me saying, I don't even know where teachers are. So these are things that I think are really kind of basic that we need to be communicating and getting people's input. And especially, having worked with Tarik, phone banking, text banking, these are things that we could definitely do to assist our very overwhelmed healthcare system in terms of getting the word out, educating people in our communities, and making sure that that outreach is culturally and linguistically appropriate. And the last thing was just to be more transparent. Right now there is so much distrust of the medical system, and it's also because of ongoing medical racism. So when you add that, there are people that I talk to, it doesn't matter their income or whatever. It's like education level. There's a lot of distrust around the vaccine, and I think it is beneficial for the city to kind of invest in. So not just come up with a cute slogan or a graphic, but to really invest in resources and tools that the community needs, and to better understand what are those barriers to vaccine access. So, since the publication of that op-ed, I've seen people post comments on the Inquirer saying, well, if certain racial groups are distrusting, then, well, let's just skip them. And, I'll take the vaccine. And that's not equity. We really have to sort of understand, why some communities have that distrust, and really be responsive to concerns about medical racism. I've shared with the public health department that I think we need to hold providers accountable for medical racism. The folks that I know who have survived COVID, and have been mistreated by doctors and hospitals, the last thing they want to do is to go to a workshop hosted by that entity. And I think that there needs to be a level of accountability where, instead of just continuing to award contracts to have these people then to become the primary vaccine providers, I think we have to start hearing from community members, who are the folks that they trust, to get information, which providers treat them with respect, and have a way to hold folks accountable. So, because we are kind of limited on time, I created like a Google Doc with different links. Since the publication of the op-ed, there have been a number of changes that Philadelphia Department of Public Health has made. And I really, I'm really proud that they kind of jumped into action. So as you can see from this Google Doc that I put into chat, following the publication, they had an interview with the Inquirer. The Inquirer asked about the racial and ethnic data of who got the vaccines. And in that, you can see, 43% of the people who got the doses were white. Only 12% were Black, 10% were Asian, 10% reported their race as other. And so they acknowledge that this is there is a racial disparity right now, and they want to work on it. And I think that's a really positive step. The second thing, they've updated their vaccine data. So the dashboard now shows vaccine data by race. And there's a map now that explains that the counts you're seeing are by the zip code, by the vaccination provider. So if you had looked at the map before, it looked like West Philly was doing really well. Like, wow, look at all those West Philadelphians that got the vaccines. And it was really sort of by the hospital, like where the shots were taking place. And that's really different because, the healthcare workers getting the shots doesn't mean that's where they live. So we kind of need to work on that. The city's COVID website now also has an updated drop-down menu. So if you're a healthcare worker that was looking for information, like how do I sign up, there's a link. And I really appreciate Tarik sharing the link to make sure that people who aren't just doctors or nurses, but the people who work at the front desk, who are the medical assistants, actually can sign up and get information. Lastly, there's going to be 2 webinars at the end of this month. They are working on American Sign Language and CART, so that's live captioning. My recommendation to them has been recorded so people who have to work during those hours can still watch it. And in the meantime, they're kind of working with the different mayors commissions, at least that's been a suggestion, is to work with those different groups to do additional community specific convenings in different languages and different messaging. Lastly, Philadelphia Department of Public Health has a survey. They'd love your response by next Wednesday, the 13th. I put the link in there. I think this is a survey that it would be helpful if a group like yours took, because it's talking about, in your experience, what some of the barriers are that you would see, for you, for your community. What are some resources that the city should consider providing? Some of the things that Jeff and I recommended were like investing in neighborhood radio, neighborhood papers, culturally specific like social media platforms, and sort of branch out beyond like the city's official Twitter handle or Facebook or mayoral briefings, because that's not something that at least people in my community pay attention to or can access. So, I've kind of taken up a lot of time just talking about the op-ed and some of the city responses. You know, obviously this is going to be an ongoing discussion, but I think that having all of you, you know, start providing input. You know, you have so much expertise, everyone in this room. And I think, you know, should be consulting, you know, consulted by the city about your thoughts about how to reach your communities. And to me, one of the things I've also said is that the community vaccination provider RFP, the way it's worded, it's like you have to be a hospital or a clinic. And I would love to see more funding available for the grassroots, you know, to hire some organizers who are culturally competent at working with those different vaccine providers in developing materials, developing events or activities to get involved. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tarik. Tarik, thank you so much. You know, he's just like a hero of mine. Like while he's testing, you know, residents, he's managed to knock on 1 million doors and make phone calls. And to me, he's like the ideal person to kind of bring this message. So Tarik, take it away.
Thank you, and I really appreciate it. That was really well said. I echo what you say from a health standpoint. I mean, I think somewhere between 30 and I've seen as high as 60%, but of healthcare providers are afraid to get the shot, the vaccine. And, you know, I think it's important that the fact is, however, there is more of a demand than the supply. The issue really starts with our federal government. I mean, you know, we look at what happened today, and we have a president who's focused on just patting his own, you know, patting his own ego and denying that he lost. Most people don't know that today, Pennsylvania reported the highest number of deaths from COVID since May. 368 Pennsylvanians died probably yesterday from COVID. 28 of those were from Philadelphia. Each day we have about 2,600 deaths a day, which is just shows the epic failure of our government to protect citizens. The problem is that every state is kind of on its own, and then to sort of figure things out. Dr. Levine, as she says, you know, we're sort of kind of creating things. This is all new. We haven't been here before, so it's really so all of the problems that we have in the healthcare setting, we call it an acute on chronic flare up. So if you have asthma and you go to the hospital from an asthma attack, it's an acute on chronic issue. All the issues that we have of inequality, issues of racism. There's not only is it chronic, but then we have an acute flare, something like COVID happens, and all those issues that are underlying, it makes the current situation that much worse. So we're really in a major issue in Philadelphia. One of the things that we fought so strongly for in the city was to protect Hahnemann, because some of our most vulnerable patients went to Hahnemann, and you know, some of the other hospital systems says, well, no, we have too many hospital beds in Philadelphia. Well, right now today we have about 700 patients in Philadelphia with COVID. 1 in 7 of those patients are on ventilators, and so we're really, I mean, it's hard. I mean, we even forget about that there was a Senate race, and you know, Mitch McConnell is no longer going to be calling the shots anymore. We forget that even that happened after the events of today. But we also are at one of the most critical times of our COVID surge right now. It's going to get worse, unfortunately, when we look at Christmas. The fact that so many people gathered. I mean, it was awful after Thanksgiving, and some of what we're seeing now are the effects from Thanksgiving. And then if you consider Christmas, a lot of people, they were like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to celebrate the holiday with my family. It's going to even get worse. So we're really at a crucial time. Another thing to know, by the way, Beth, how much time I'm not going to go on that much longer, but I don't want to ruin another speaker's time. How much time do we have? Is there another speaker after me?
Yep. I think we have 2 judicial candidates. Is that right, or just one?
Actually, the judicial candidates, I actually had sent an email to Marissa saying could go on in February, but I think one of them is here. If he wants to speak, he certainly may.
Yeah, I think George hung up or logged off. So maybe
Okay.
we're good.
Yeah, I did. It was a busy day. I thought definitely have them coming.
Yeah, no, it's
So
okay.
you're good, Tarik. You have whatever time you want.
All right, thanks. Give me the Apollo hook. If I need to get off, just let me know. Just give me the hook. You know, the other issue is that Pennsylvania, unfortunately, in terms of testing, we're 46th out of 50 states in terms of testing. So we're on the wrong side of that. Of like the 50 like states, we're at the bottom in terms of not getting enough testing. We do have, I think, 900 places in the state where you can get tested. But the problem is education, letting people know where to go, like a campaign to get people tested. And again, we talk about acute on chronic issues. The chronic issue is that, you know, our public health system is woefully underfunded. And the acute problem is that not only do we have to figure out how do we get the vaccines to everybody, but we also have to still manage the problem. And we're basically only now just catching up vaccinating people for new cases. I mean, like if we're like comparing new cases to vaccinations, we're only like getting kind of even there. But we've only vaccinated in Pennsylvania about 31,000 people. So you know, it's a major problem in terms of because we need to get these vaccines out. And we also need more vaccines too, if that makes any sense. Obviously, Donald Trump, in one of the many ways that he's really screwed us up was that when they bought the vaccine that I got, the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine, when he bought it, they actually offered the United States an option to buy 500 million doses. This was, I think, in July or August. The administration passed on it because they wanted proof that there was that the vaccine worked back when they had like just first developed it. And so Pfizer was like, that's fine. And in November, you know, I think Europe got like the rest of the vaccines. And so we could have had 250 million more Americans vaccinated, or at least had those vaccines from Pfizer in the pipeline. That's not the case. Fortunately, there are other companies that are getting their vaccines approved. Obviously, Moderna has one. I think Oxford has one. I think someone said Johnson & Johnson has one that's coming out. So you know, there's a kind of a lot of issues. I can tell you that you know, I did receive the vaccine. I got the first dose 2.5 weeks ago. After I got the vaccine, I felt great. Actually, I was really grateful to get it. And I would say the next day, I had an intense workout that night, and then the next morning I had another intense workout, New Year's resolution. And so I was like really tired, like Saturday afternoon, and then Sunday, and then Monday. Not like super tired, but just like extra tired, like a little extra tired. So I'm not sure if it was just the stress of everything, or if it was from the vaccine. I did hear other people who got the vaccine, they did feel like a little tired. Also, I had a little bit of soreness at the site that like completely went away on Monday. It got worse when I actually didn't realize my arm was sore, and someone later asked me where they would get the vaccine, and I was like showing them. This was later on that day, and I went like right on the spot where I got it, and I was like, ow. And so it was bothering me like for the next day. Aside from that, this is from the Pfizer vaccine. I haven't heard of any major side effects. Most of the side effects that have been documented are very mild, mild to moderate. Some people have had fevers. From what I understand, though, of the people who've gotten it, and I think in the U.S. there was 4.5 million people got it. I think about 21 had serious side effects. So, which is like really not bad for, and I think as far as I know, all of them were fine. Most of those reactions were allergic reactions. And so what they actually do is when you get the vaccine, they actually observe you. Most allergic reactions, if you're going to have anaphylaxis, it happens like soon after the shot. And so they actually monitor you for, I forget the time, but maybe it's like 15 minutes or 20 minutes or after the shot. And then there's a protocol for like reporting symptoms. So, the other issue I just wanted to just very briefly touch on is, again, we talk about in healthcare, we talk about acute on chronic issues. So the chronic issue of racism, and then the acute issue is that people are very hesitant to get the vaccine, and it's extremely understandable. And it's not always really a matter of just information. It's just the abuse and the trauma in the healthcare system of people of color, particularly African Americans. And so there's a lot of people of color, particularly African Americans, who are justifiably like nervous to get the vaccine. I think a lot of my colleagues who I talk to, they're sort of taking most of what I hear is that we're just kind of taking a wait and see, just to kind of see how things happen, and making sure that that people aren't having major side effects. And again, it's like this was, I think all the steps were followed, but since we had to get this vaccine out sooner rather than later, it didn't happen in like a matter of like years. It happened within a matter of months. Even though they follow the steps, it was sort of, they didn't have that longitudinal data from the Pfizer vaccine. And next time I come on, if the shots are available, and people want to know more about the individual shots, we can talk maybe more about that. But I can tell you that people of color in the vaccine trials, they were included, again, because of the racism, historical racism problems with the Tuskegee experiment and other issues of abuse. People have been reluctant to sign up for clinical trials. Also, a lot of times they're not recruited people of color. The vaccine, this vaccine actually, I think 9.5% of people were African American. Our overall population of African American in people who are African American in the U.S. is about 13.5%, I believe. So I was a little underrepresented for people who are African American. People who are Hispanic actually were double represented of the, I think it was like maybe whatever the numbers was, double represented. Asian Americans were a little underrepresented, but it did include, they also included people with pre-existing conditions, asthma. A lot of people, I think 42% were over age 55. So the vaccines, I think, there's definitely a need to educate people about it. I'm Muslim, and I think it's for some of my Muslim patients, they like to know that there was a Muslim immigrant that actually helped develop the vaccine. But I think what's important, and I really look forward to working with Anna, and I'll stop talking in a minute. Sorry, it's been a long day. If I'm rambling, I apologize. But I think it's extremely important to actively work to make sure that people of color have access to the vaccine. Not forcing people to get it, but making sure that they have that access. Because as we see, most people who've gotten the vaccine are white, or 42%, and that are getting it, and it's a major issue. And so the infrastructure, again, we talk about acute on chronic issues. The problems with infrastructure is something that, and I think, Anna, you said it really well in a text to me, that sometimes you just have to grab a folding chair and put yourself at the table, because I don't know that that a lot of activists, nurses have the seat at the table, so they can really be the thorn in the side and make sure that people of color, underrepresented populations are truly being represented. Thanks.
Oh, thank you both, Anna and Tarik, for your really interesting insights. Do people have questions for either of them? Has it just been a really long day and we're all ready to go to bed?
I don't have any questions for either Anna or Tarik, but I will say thank you for providing us with that information, because that was a wealth of knowledge, and it's good to hear people who are on the ground doing work share this level of transparency that you both have with what you're seeing and what you're encountering. And I see the efforts are there, and the intention is there to make sure that people have an understanding up close and personal of what you're seeing through the eyes of a medical professional. So I definitely thank you for that. But I know we don't have any more speakers, but I just need to know, what are the thoughts seeing our nation's capital breached, seeing someone obtain mail from the speaker's desk, seeing people sit in the chair of the Speaker of the House, seeing our walls scaled, the entire world seeing the level of vulnerability to American security. I mean, this is an abomination. This is abomination. You know, when we saw the uprisings around the nation, we saw the commander-in-chief call for 10 years imprisonment for anyone who dared, got near, harmed, or did anything to our most prestigious federal institutions. And we're looking at white privilege. If you ever in your entire life had a question as to what white privilege looks like, today, January 6, 2020, is your example if you've never had a clear understanding, because had anyone Black got remotely near the walls of the Capitol, we would have seen man down, man down, man down. But here we are. So for anyone that had any question on this call tonight about, the apprehension of Black people taking any kind of medicine coming from the federal government, or the lack of trust that Black people have for this country, or the disdain that Black people have for American government and leaders, here we are. Here we are. And we know that someone died. So I'd like to hear what you guys are thinking, because I don't think anyone on the phone is shocked.
Well, I know you. I wanted to say something. I know I'll come back about my judicial campaign, I guess, next month, right, Sam?
Yes, next month.
But I did want to say that what we saw shows that there's two Americas. You've heard that, and it sounds corny, but when you see it in front of your own eyes, the disparities are right before us. We can flash back to when Black Lives Matter, when they were protesting in Washington, D.C. And that was a protest, not a riot. The area was completely contained. There was fencing, you recall, fencing around the White House. There was a cotillion, a platoon of law enforcement surrounding the protesters who were marching peacefully. There were some that were really not part of Black Lives Matter that caused a disturbance. But here you see in plain view on cameras, people breaking through windows on the Senate and congressional floor. Like you said, picking up mail, and a woman died. A woman was shot to death. We don't know what happened. At least I have CNN on the other room trying to hear, but we don't know what happened. Someone died. So this isn't just, some practical joke with someone sitting at the speaker's chair and reading mail. And somebody was in Pelosi's office, I believe, and it broke in Pelosi's office. Some kind of prank. Someone lost their life. People were injured. Law enforcement officers went to the hospital as well. This is an attack on America, our America. And we talked about sedition. Sedition is the inciting of a violent riot with the purpose of overthrowing the government. It's a serious felony of up to 20 years imprisonment. There was question about that before. So it's a real thing. It's not something to just talk about in chat rooms. This is real. And we see it before our eyes happening in front of us. And it's very disturbing, especially because I am a sitting judge, even though I'm going for another judicial office, which to be continued next month, but for the Supreme Court, for those who want to know. But, you know, the breach of the rule of law, and that's certainly I've dedicated my life to, and I see, shout out to Wendy over there. I know she's out there too, committed to the principles of the Constitution as a living, real principles that should operate in our courtroom, and not just in the courtroom, but in our lives. And to see people trampling on all of those principles and everything we stand for as a country is so outrageous and painful. And people, well, you know, it's not that bad. And when the police finally did come, there were comments like, well, you didn't take it back, we gave it back.
Yep.
As some of the people said that to the police, you didn't take the Capitol back to us, from us, we gave it back to you. So just a complete breakdown of any kind of proper, whatever you want to call it, how to live in a civil society. It's a complete breakdown of civil society in America, but only certain people can get away with that, and others can't. And it's so disturbing as a judge to see that, and so painful. So I know I'm committed to double down, and certainly my commitment to the rule of law, to ensure that there's equal justice for all, that we bring the same energy to what we saw with that group to what we're bringing to other groups when they choose to exercise their real right to protest and not riot, destroy property, break into the Capitol. That's not protest. That's not protected speech or activity at all. And the fact that there's any discussion about that is even more disturbing, you know, to me. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Judge Nichols. We definitely appreciate you, and we're very much excited to hear that you are running as a candidate for the state Supreme Court. We're honored. We know that we have not had, I think the last elected Black Supreme
72.
Court justice we had was in 1972 and up through the 90s, 1990s. So this is a testament to the fact that Black people are shut out of leadership. And when they do run, they are questioned. Why is she running? Why is he running? Or what is her qualifications? And if we have an issue with what is going on in our nation's capital right now, then we should have an issue with any Black candidate running for office, looking at the current leadership that we have now. We saw an entire slate of white judges go in the last time, and no one had issue with it. So if we are going to call ourselves a progressive organization, then we need to have these progressive and honest conversations to put forth a progressive
and my
agenda.
final word is no Black woman has ever been elected to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Not elected. There have been 2 Black women that were appointed interimly between elections, but no Black woman in 300 years. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court is the oldest appellate court in America. Only 1 Black man has been elected, 72 to the 90s. No Black woman has ever been elected to our court. So that's the story of the 2 Americas.
Absolutely. Anna, looks like Anna has her hand up over there.
No, I was clapping. I mean, I really,
Oh,
so glad, Melissa, you kind of created this space for folks to react. And thank you so much, Caroline, for bravely running. You know, I can't even imagine when you hear about 300 years without a Black female judge on the Supreme Court, the kind of vitriol you get on the campaign trail or just doing your job. So I have so much respect for you.
It's intense, but I just think of Shirley Chisholm. Somebody mentioned the quote about the folding chair. That's actually Shirley Chisholm. She said, if you don't have a seat at the table, you bring a folding chair. So I think of Shirley Chisholm. I think of Fannie Lou Hamer. I think of Justice Juanita Kidd Stout, who's one of the justices that was appointed for 6 months. She only served 6 months. You know, I can't be in no ways tired. You know, I have to stand up. I have to fight. I'm tired. It's discouraging. The vitriol is very intense. You know, politics is no fun. But this is what we have to do. I have to stand up. I have to fight for all of those that have come before me. So I'm gonna fight. I don't know how it's gonna come out, but I'm gonna fight. And I'll leave my information in the chat, and we'll talk more, you know, next month.
Oh yes.
So we'll have Judge Nichols back next month, and she'll talk to us more about her platform and her candidacy for the state Supreme Court. Also, we have George Twardy on the line, who's with us now, but he's gonna, Sam said he's gonna come back and join us as well. So we are going to have a long lineup of judges for, you know, state Supreme Court, Superior, Commonwealth, on down to municipal races. So we're very excited for the candidates that we're going to bring, especially next month, February, even though we know it's the shortest month of the year, it's Black History Month, but we'll make sure that we have some really, really powerful speakers to come and talk to us. Sam?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, does anyone have any announcements? Anna, is it okay if I share via our email some of the information from your Google Doc?
Great, thank you all so much.
Oh yes, well, thank you. That was incredibly informative. Judge Nichols, you know, I'm a big fan. We've hung out before. And we look forward to you visiting us in February. What a crazy day! What a day! You know, I just want to put my 2 cents in. What a day that really shows us how there are 2 Americas. You know, I've taught college for a number of years, and I just think people will use the video from today in years to come to show. You'll be able to put up the video of what happened in Washington today next to the peaceful protests that happened just a few months ago for the Black Lives Matter movement, and you will, and future, hopefully future generations will see just how bad things got in 2020 and 2021, and how terrible history was brought forward, unfortunately, and hopefully we can you know, advocate against that. Does anyone have any other anything else that they want to put forward before we break up and until February?
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah, sure, Wendy.
So I felt, to Melissa's question, that civil war was declared today against democracy, is how I felt. That war was declared, frankly. And with what's coming in the days ahead, I want to know what we can do to make sure that people are held accountable. Because as to Melissa's point, if the people that were there were Black, we'd be talking about this well past the next few weeks. My fear is this is going to get, for lack of a better word, whitewashed once the vote is done, and we're not going to be talking about it anymore. And what are we going to do to get our Democratic officials that we put in power to actually act on this? Because this day should not be forgotten. This was an act of war. And I see it happen in the city of Philadelphia. I forget what it was this summer, there was an issue that came out and the mayor delayed, I think it was an issue in prosecution or what he was doing, but then something else came out that overshadowed it. And then nobody was talking about that issue anymore. And, you know, we're in the next 14 days, like, what do you do to address the fact that war was declared? Because I don't think it's going to adequately be addressed.
I think we can't.
I just have that fear.
Right? We can't let up. We have to keep contacting our representatives in DC, and you know, even President-elect Biden. I mean, I thought he spoke pretty decisively today on the topic, but I agree. We can't let them forget this in the next 2 weeks.
Well, Mayor Bowser tried. She's the one that activated the National Guard, but the problem is the Capitol is technically not Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
It's federal property, so she had no authority to activate the guard on that property. So that's what happened. That authority, it had to come from the president, who did not give that authority until things really got out of hand. So the mayor tried. Mayor Bowser had activated, just for the record, the National Guard, but unfortunately that the Capitol is technically not part of Washington, D.C. So, it was our sitting president's choice. So.
Well, I just like to sit in there and say one of the things that I think that we can do as an organization on this call, we can get a ball rolling and demand, as Judge Nichols says, that took place on federal property. So we know that federal leaders are responsible for responding. So Philly for Change can take the onus to start a petition to demand congressional hearings to hold people accountable and demand that arrests be made for breaching the people's capital. That was our capital that was breached, and we demand that our representatives for Congress hold hearings and hold those accountable. That's the only way we make sure that this does not go away. We demand congressional hearings.
There are pictures to show the perpetrators. I mean, very excellent pictures of people, so people can be arrested. So we don't want to leave the call thinking nothing can be done. Right. Because they can still be arrested.
And they should be.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They can and they should be. So I think one of the things that we can do, Philadelphia gets a lot of attention. We could start raising some ruckus and putting calls in to Mary Gay Scanlon, Madeline Dean, Bob Casey. We know that Toomey's not going to do anything. Brendan Boyle, Dwight Evans. We can ask our congressional leaders to, I don't know what the process is for them to request congressional hearings, but I think we can start putting pressure on our electeds in the Commonwealth here.
Yeah, we certainly can contact our representatives to ask that the people who were who made this unprecedented assault on the seat of government are held accountable. I mean, that's a very, very simple ask if you think about it.
And given the events of today, we can also call Senator Casey, because the Senate can hold hearings now too.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I called Dwight's Philadelphia office. I don't want to bother them in DC, and I asked them to ask for Trump's impeachment again. And I called Casey's Philadelphia office. I didn't get anything, but I just wanted to say that when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, I'm part of this group called 215 Philadelphia's Alliance, and it was like the Monday after that, and I felt like just having that group was really therapeutic. And I feel the same way, after this awful stain on our nation, to have you all tonight and to be with you all, like that was actually a point of comfort for me to know that I would be on this call with you all tonight. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, everybody. So just 1 minute, I just want to say thanks to everybody for being here tonight and doing this, because it's nice to, after a day like today, have something that you can rely on. And Philly for Change, the first Wednesday of the month, is a reliable place to go, just to vent, right? After the year that we've had, and certainly the day that we had. But what we saw today was just a manifestation of weeks and months of lie after lie after lie that came from the president through the halls of Congress, through every hallway, through every state legislature, to everybody's cell phone, to everybody's Twitter, to everybody's Facebook. It just lies, lies, lies. And this is the culmination of what has just been an attack on our democracy at the highest level. And what do we do? Well, we do what we did tonight. That's what we do, and we continue to do it. We have groups like Philly for Change, and we march, and we do everything that we always did. We just do it more with the knowledge that now that we've won, we have to continue to fight. And I put my statement in the chat, but it's, for some reason it isn't. I'm not very savvy on the Zoom, but I issued a statement today, just tonight. That's why I got off and then back on again. Pretty much calling for all those things. I just saw on CNN that there are reports that the president at first rebuffed the calling of the National Guard. And if you think about that, he was calling for the National Guard in states and cities throughout the country in June of last year. He was going to send them himself if the mayor didn't call the National Guard. And the reports they're saying that the president initially rebuffed the National Guard. I don't think that he is mentally fit to remain for the next 14 days. The damage that he can do is quite frankly frightening. And at the end of the day, none of this is going to stop the eventuality that there was an election, there was a winner, and there will be a new president of the United States of America on January 20th.
Amen to that.
Well, it seems that we have come to the end of our program. I'm very pleased to see that we are all on the same sheet of music. We see that our democracy is continuously under attack, and we know that we're at an all-time, I think this is like one of the foremost intense moments. I think the one thing that bothers me is knowing that we have so many brothers and sisters who are in the armed force that sit by, abroad in other countries working on the behalf of American people, but we're there. They are watching our own nation's capital under attack. Could you imagine being a soldier right now in a foreign country there on behalf of Americans watching your home be attacked? Can you imagine what that feels like? We cannot allow this to happen ever again. So I think that just like Lisa wrote a letter, I think we all have the responsibility to reach out to our electeds and demand not only congressional, but as Dave or someone pointed out, Senate hearings from Bob Casey. I think we have to really, really push for this, because if we do not respond to this and respond swiftly, who knows what could happen next, right? Who knows what can happen next? So this has to be dealt with very, very swiftly, and there needs to be a very loud response from the American people about what happened to our nation's capital. We need to feel that our democracy is safe. We need to feel that our house, our capital, our White House, all of the federal buildings that belong to the American people, we need to know that they're safe and protected, and that our electeds are not going to be ushered to panic rooms to safety because we have domestic terrorists that our country refuses to deal with. So I think I can take the liberty in closing out. Does anyone have any more announcements or anything that you want to share before we close out?
I just wanted to thank all of our speakers tonight. We had such an amazing lineup of people, and there were so many interesting topics to cover tonight. So I really appreciate all of you sharing your insight and knowledge with us. I definitely learned a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you to Tarik and Anna and Judge Nichols and Carlos Vega and Judge Hangley, Michelle that was here, and Wendy, your input, and Lisa. We thank all of you for coming. Next month, we'll be back February. We'll have more judges to come on board. Hopefully we'll have our current district attorney, Mr. Larry Krasner, and hopefully I hope that you all report back to the actions that you took and whether you got a response back from your congressional member or your Senate member. So I'm going to reach out to Evans, Boyle, Dean, Scanlon, Casey, Houlihan, and Wild. That's the list of people that I intend to personally reach out to, and I urge you all to do the same. So on behalf of everyone here at Philly for Change, we thank you for joining us tonight. We wish you a happy new year. Good night, and we look forward to seeing you right back here next month, February, the first Wednesday of the month, to join us.
Thanks very much.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye, everybody.